Hi, my name is Rob. I'm a software engineer from Seattle, Washington. In this video, we're going to go through the Healthcare in Different States project. In the last few lessons, you have learned how to use box plots. Box plots are one of the most common ways to visualize datasets. They are like a histogram in that they give you a sense of the central tendency and spread of data. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with median values, interquartile range, visualizing first and third quartiles with box plots, and also analyzing multiple box plots. Alright, let's get started. We're going to look at healthcare in different states. We're going to use box plots to investigate the way hospitals across the US charge patients for medical procedures. This is a data set that we've used before, so it may look familiar to you. This data originally came from the United States Health and Human Services Department. So let's go ahead and use box plots to investigate the data. For step number 1, we've created a variable called healthcare, and we're using the Panda library that we imported in on line 2 to read our healthcare CSV by using the read CSV method available from the Panda library. So the first thing we want to do is we want to print healthcare, and we only want to return the first 5 rows of the data set. We can do this by using the head method available from the Panda library. So let's go ahead and run our code. And we can see the results down below in our terminal. We have the first 5 rows of the data set by default. We could access more rows by putting a different number in our 10 method, but 5 works for now. So let's go ahead and scroll through our data. So we want to see how healthcare works in different states, and we want to find the column that seems like it'd be most helpful to do that. So we can go ahead and expand our results, and if we are looking at our different columns, we might assume that this provider state column is going to be the one that provides us with some data that we need. Okay, let's go ahead and comment out this line of code. As we'll be printing out values several times throughout this walkthrough, we can just comment out code that we don't want to print over and over again. So let's go ahead and mark step 1 as done, and move on to step 2. With all this data, let's go ahead and just focus in on one type of medical expense to help isolate how costs vary from state to state. We'll do this by focusing in on diagnoses that have to do with chest pain. So let's go ahead and print healthcare, and then we're going to access the values that are in this DRG definition column. So we pass in a string DRG definition, and we want to find all the different diagnoses in our dataset. So we can do that by chaining on the method unique. And uniques will be returned in order of appearance. This does not sort for us. So let's go ahead and save our code. Now we see all these results on the bottom of our screen. So let's go ahead and find the value for what hospitals charge in regard to patients with chest pain. If we're to scroll through our list, we can see that item 313 looks like it has to do with chest pain. So let's go ahead and mark step 2 done and move on to step 3. Let's grab only the rows in the dataset that are about chest pain. So let's comment out this line of code that we wrote earlier, and we'll set chest pain, our variable, equal to healthcare, our data set, and then we're going to look for values at healthcare DRG definition, what we did before, and we specifically want to look at where the column of DRG definitions equals this string of 313 chest pain. So if we want, we can go ahead and print chest pain right now and see what the value of this is. And we can see now that all of our data being returned has to do with the cost of medical procedures relating to chest pain. You could switch this up by targeting a different type of medical procedure, and if you do that, you probably would want to change up the variable that you use in its place. So let's go ahead and mark step 3 is done and move on to step 4. We want to work on separating our data for the cost of medical procedures having to do with chest pain by state. So let's go ahead and comment out line 10 And now we're going to find the list of states. Let's go ahead and practice this by finding one state's data set for chest pain medical expenses. We'll focus on Alabama. So we'll create a variable, Alabama chest pain, and we'll go ahead and set it equal to chest pain that we already defined above, and we want to access the value of chest pain specifically at the column of provider state, where that column is equal to AL for Alabama. If we were looking at Colorado chest pain, we would look at CO for Colorado. Okay, let's go ahead and print out these results and see what we get. Print Alabama chest pain. Alright, so we can see that all of our results are now restricted to the state of Alabama. Let's go ahead and mark step 4 as complete and move on to step 5. Now that we've targeted the state of Alabama, we now want to find the average cost of those diagnoses, and those are going to be found in the column of average covered charges. Let's make sure we note the space before our text in our string and after the text in our string. So I'm going to go ahead and comment out line 14. I only want to print the average costs. So we'll say cost is equal to Alabama chest pain that we defined above, and we're targeting the column of average covered charges. And then we're going to say dot values to get those values. So now let's go ahead and print cost. And now down below we have the results of the average covered charges. Okay, let's mark step 5 as complete and move on to step 6. We're now going to make a box plot of those values. So I'm going to comment out line 16. And on line 17, I'm going to call PLT to access our pyplot library. So I'm going to call the box plot method, and we'll go ahead and pass in cost. Now if we want to show our box plot, we'll simply call our show method. Now let's go ahead and run our code, and we can now see our box plot on the right hand side of the screen. Alright, great job. We've now seen how to create a box plot for one state, but we want to get a box plot for all states to help us analyze our data and what medical care costs for chest pain across the 50 states. So let's move on to step 7. I'm going to go ahead and comment out all of this code related to finding the cost of medical procedures in Alabama. Now let's work on creating box plots for all of our states. So we're going to create a states variable, and we're going to go ahead and set it equal to chest pain, which we defined up above, and then we're going to target our column for provider state, and we're going to run our unique method on this again. And so this will return uniques in order of appearance. And now to check our work, we can go ahead and print states. And we can see that all of our states with medical procedures for heart conditions have been accounted for. So I'm going to go ahead and mark step 7 done and move on to step 8. Let's go ahead and comment out our print statement on line 21. And now we're going to use a for loop to separate the data set into a data set for each state. First, we're going to create a list called datasets, and we're going to set it equal to an empty list that we're going to populate with states. Now we're going to go ahead and create a for loop. We'll say for state in states, and this state is the human readable variable that we're using. We could say X or Z, but state makes sense because that's the list that we're looping through. Now for each item that we're looping through, append to our datasets list our chest pain variable that we created earlier, and we want the value at chest pain at the column of provider state, where it is equal to the state that we are currently looping through, and we want the value of the column average covered charges. And we'll have a space, and then we want to access the values. Okay, let's go ahead and mark step 8 is done. We now have a datasets list that now contains 50 datasets, one for each state. Let's move on to step 9. We're about to draw 50 box plots, which means we need a lot more room. So we can create that room for the length of this data by typing in plt figure and pass in fig size equal to 20, 6. And this is going to make our figure long enough to have room for so many box plots. Okay, we'll mark step 9 is done and move on to step 10. We're going to go ahead and draw our box plot. So say plt.boxplot, and we'll pass in datasets, and then we want to pass in labels equal to states to label our box plots. Finally, we want to call our show method so that we can see our box plot. So let's go ahead and press save to run our code. And there they are. Let's mark step 10 as complete and move on to step 11 of interpreting and exploring our results. So we see all 50 box plots now, and if your graph is too small, you can go ahead and expand your graph by clicking here to be able to take a better look at the data. So this is time to analyze. What information have you learned by looking at these box plots side by side? What state has the largest spread? What state has the largest median? Which states have the most outliers? Let's go ahead and look at our data again. It looks like California, New Jersey, and Florida have the largest spreads. Vermont, in contrast, has almost no spread. The state with the largest median cost for a chest pain diagnosis appears to be New Jersey. The state with the smallest median cost is Maryland. California, Georgia, and Tennessee all have a fair number of outliers. What observations did you notice? Let's go ahead and minimize this and mark step 11 as complete. So for step 12, this is up to you. Take some more time to explore. Here are some ways in which you can investigate the data more. Look for different diagnosis. We looked at chest pain. Find a different medical condition. You could attempt to group states by regions rather than just individual states. Are there certain areas of the US that charge more or less for medical procedures? And you can work on plotting something other than average cover charges. Maybe you want to look at the categories such as Medicare. Try looking at new diagnosis, new regions, and plotting values of different categories to analyze them. In this project, you were able to visualize data sets with box plots. Box plots can tell you if your data is symmetrical, how tightly your data is grouped, and if and how your data is skewed. Alright, great job. Thanks for watching. This is Rob with Codecademy. Happy coding.